Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Well, let's get started. I don't know whether to laugh or cry about this, but apparently on Monday, House Democrats stopped an effort to increase congressional pay for the first time since 2009. So it's been 10 years since Congress has increased their pay. Can I get a wah, 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 who cares? They make $174,000 a year. $174,000 per year. Hang on, I want to check something. And I've checked it and I was right. The top 5% of households, 3/4 of whom had two income earners, had incomes of $166,200 per annum. $166,000. That's according to, I know, don't shoot me, but that's according to Wikipedia. That is a two-earner household. Puts you in the top 5% of wage earners in the United States. A single United States congressman makes $174,000 a year, $8,000 more alone than the $166,000 of the two wage earning couple. That puts them in the top 5%. So when I read that Congress, that the Democrats were actually considering a $4,500 pay hike, that would take them to what? To $178,500 a year. No Republicans supported it. And finally, the Democrats backed off on Monday night and said, no Republican support. We're not going to move forward. Now, just to be clear, just to be objective here, which I'm not prone to do, but to be objective on this point, if Congress were to grant themselves a pay increase, that would not apply to any existing member of Congress unless until they were reelected. But guess who came out in support of the wage increase? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
A lot of spouses leave their job to support their members full time. And, it may not be politically popular to say, but honestly, this is why there's so much pressure to turn to lobbying firms and to cash in on member service after people leave because precisely of this issue. So it may be politically convenient and it may make you look good in the short term for saying, we're not voting for pay increases, but we should be fighting for pay increases for every American worker. We should be fighting for a $15 minimum wage pegged to inflation so that everybody in the United States with a salary, with a wage, gets a cost of living increase. Members of Congress, retail workers, everybody should get cost of living increases to accommodate for the changes in our economy. And then when we don't do that, it only increases the pressure on members to exploit loopholes like insider trading loopholes to make it on the back end. So
do you think there's a tendency? Do you think there's a
Now, there's a lot to unpack in what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just said. But let me see if I can break it down. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez believes that members of Congress should get a pay raise. Whether you call it a cost of living increase or you call it a pay raise, I don't care. It's the same thing. It's more money in their pocket. So $174,000 to $178,500 annual. That's not even accounting all of their expenses and everything else they get paid. So don't get me started. This has me so outraged I can't see straight. And what has me more outraged is not the fact that they proposed the idea, because there's always some yahoo that thinks that Congress is not getting paid enough and they ought to get paid more. I've got a suggestion. Why don't we pay members of Congress $15 an hour? $15 an hour, and I'm not talking about $15 an hour when you're at some cocktail reception. I'm not talking about $15 an hour when you're at some fundraiser. I'm not talking about some $15 an hour when you're flying home. I'm not talking about $15 an hour when you're sitting on your ass in your chair at home watching yourself on the TV. No, I'm talking about $15 an hour when you're either in a committee meeting, you're in a markup meeting, you're on the floor, you're actually legislating. Otherwise, you don't get squat. You don't get anything. God, this pisses me off. I just can't tell. And then for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to say she says that she has to get a cost of living increase because not getting a cost of living increase puts pressure on her to cash in. You know, when she leaves Congress, which, oh, dear Lord, please don't leave Congress. I want her to stay as long as possible. Because she will always be the baseline for stupidity. She will always be the baseline that we need for socialism and for Marxism. She's a useful idiot serving a useful purpose. So don't go anywhere, AOC. Then she says, the other reason that members of Congress need a pay increase is because if without the pay increase, when they leave, they're under pressure then to exploit loopholes. How about this? How about we just put a term? You know, I've always been opposed to term limits because I believe that term limits are in the hands of every single one of you. If you don't like the current makeup of Congress, you can start with your own member. And I don't care how much you love your own. Oh, you know, Michael, my member of Congress, why, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yeah, and you're going to continue to vote him in or her in year after year after year, and then you're going to come and bitch at me about, well, it's the same old Congress, they don't do anything. I want term limits. You know, you can exercise term limits every time you go to the freaking ballot box. Oh, but Michael, if I vote against my congressman, he's one of the good guys. And then, you know, well, you know what? Sometimes bad things happen. And sometimes you don't always get what you want. Cue up the Rolling Stones. Bottom line is this. Do not come to me and say that you want term limits if you continue to vote for the same person every 2 years or every 6 years. You have the power to exercise term limits every single time you go to the ballot box. Then for AOC to say, oh my, I need to take a chill pill here. For her to then, now think about this. This woman was a bartender. She complained about not being able to pay her rent. She complained about, and of course, all of that was a big fat lie because she actually comes from a wealthy family, but that's neither here nor there. She was out on her own, so I'll give her credit for that. So she's out bartending. She's struggling to make a living in Manhattan or Brooklyn or wherever she was actually living. I don't know. I don't care. If you can't make a living in Brooklyn, if you can't make a living in Manhattan as a bartender, you know what? Pick up your ass and move. Move to Des Moines. I mean, every other Democrat's in Des Moines right now. You might as well move to Des Moines. But do not tell me this. Do not tell me that you need a cost of living increase, because if you don't get one, then when you leave, you have to become a lobbyist, or when you leave, you have to start exercising all these loopholes that allow you to continue to make $174,000 or $178,500 a year. Bite me. Just absolutely bite me. I have a true disdain, an absolutely serious disdain for people who come to me and say two things. Well, Michael, you know, they work really hard. You know, they've got to maintain 2 homes. No, they don't. They can make a choice. They can choose to either live in their district or they can choose to go back and forth. That's their choice. Nobody says that you have to maintain 2 homes, so don't feed me that. Then the other thing that people tell me is, oh, but you know, they've got this horrible work schedule. They got to raise all this money. They got to do all this stuff. They chose to do this. Nobody put a gun to their head and said, you've got to go file to become a member of the United States Congress or the United States Senate. Every single one of them made the choice to make that race. And if AOC chose to make the race and she didn't win, she would be back making her $15 an hour or whatever they pay for a bartender. You know, actually, I would think that a good bartender in Manhattan can make a good boatload of money. You're not going to live in a penthouse. You're not going to necessarily live in Greenwich Village or Hell's Kitchen. You're not going to live on the Upper East Side, but you're going to make a pretty good living as a bartender in New York City if you're a good one. And then to have the audacity to tell me that, well, we need this cost of living increase because we're already in the top 5% of wage earners in the country on our own, don't even have to have a spouse making any money, and we're already in the top 5% of wage earners, and we need additional money because if we don't get it, then we're forced to go out and do all these unethical things or things that AOC seems to think is unethical, like being a lobbyist. You know, being a lobbyist is not an unethical profession. You may hate lobbyists, but lobbyists actually serve a useful purpose for members of Congress. And by the way, you're a lobbyist. Have you ever written a letter? You ever sent an email? You ever made a phone call? You ever talked to a member of Congress? You're a lobbyist. You're exercising your right of free speech. You are exercising your right to petition members of Congress. Holy cow. I probably should have picked a different topic to start off with. But between the fact that they already make $174,000 a year, which puts them in the top 5%, and then for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Marxist, the socialist, to then say, well, I need more money because, well, I wasn't making any money just, a year and a half ago, and now I'm making $174,000 a year, and I have to live up in the Navy Yard, which is a really nice area of Washington, D.C., and I have to live in this really nice, expensive apartment, and I have to go back to my congressional district on the Acela. You don't have to fly. You can get on the train and go up. In fact, you can get on the Acela for first class and go one way for maybe $160. And if you're making a legitimate business trip, you can probably get you and me as the taxpayers to pay for it. $174,000 a year. If you ever want to just ever question that members of Congress, and I don't care, Michael, you're talking about my member of Congress, and he's a good person. I like him. He makes $174,000 a year. They want more money. They had the audacity to actually put this forward. Now, granted, no Republican stepped up. No Republican said, yeah, I'll sign on to this. So the Democrats backed off. All of that is immaterial to me. The only thing that is material to me is the attitude. The attitude that this is a career, that this is a full-time job, that is not, in Colorado, we have, I forget how long our legislative days are. Is it 120 days? I forget what it is. I don't know. I don't care. Texas is even shorter. You know what we ought to do is instead of term limits, what we ought to do is figure out a way to constitutionally limit the amount of time that Congress can actually be in session. As Mark Twain famously said one time, the only time that the Republic is really safe is when they're not in session. $174,000 a year. Bite my ass. I mean, just bite my ass. Well, breathe in, breathe out. $174,000 a year. Let's change everything entirely. Testicle spiked beer. Yeah, that's a thing. So if you're not making $174,000 a year, but you want to live like a king, then you can apparently buy Rocky Mountain Oyster Stout. It's made by the Wine Coop Brewing Company in Denver. Now, I hate to even mention the Wine Coop Brewing Company because, well, that was founded originally by our sometimes socialist, sometimes capitalist, most of the time howdy-doody governor John Hickenlooper. But back in 2012, they tried to be funny by creating this April Fool's video announcing their new beer called Rocky Mountain Oyster Stout, which, of course, references the classic Western snack of fried bull testicles, Rocky Mountain oysters. For all of you that don't live in Colorado, if somebody offers you, look, I've tried bull testicles, and I put them in the same category as any other organ meat. I don't like brain. I don't like tongue. I don't like testicles. I don't like liver. I don't like any of that stuff. I want muscle. But instead of getting a bunch of gross reactions from all the beer fanatics that, most of you that listen to this podcast, they responded enthusiastically. So Wine Coop decided to keep the attention going by keeping their customers happy and followed by actually brewing the beer. So yeah, all you beer nerds that love a nutty brew so much, a nutty brew. Oh, this brew has such a nutty nose to it. Oh, the aroma is so nutty. Yes, because it's what it is. That's exactly what it is. I mean, if Virginia can come up with a Lucky Charms IPA, a beer made with bull testicles doesn't surprise me. Let's all have a craft beer party. I can't afford one right now because I don't make $174,000 a year. Yeah, I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it go. So CNN's Jim Acosta is out with a new book. So he's out pushing his book everywhere. And he was on CNN's Anderson Cooper show, in which Acosta issued a warning to conservative media. Now, we're going to get to his warning to conservative media in just a second, but I want to start out with the beginning of this interview because Anderson Cooper says something to Jim Acosta that Jim Acosta ignores, and I think it's worth contemplating.
Because we're concerned about our safety and security.
You've been accused, as you are well aware, of making yourself part of the story, of antagonizing them to get a soundbite, to have an exchange.
Right, and I've heard that, and my response to that is, look, we've been thrust into sort of an unprecedented situation. The president.
So my response to that is, well, yes, I have to, because we've been thrust into an unprecedented position. You don't have to react to or become a part of the news story. I don't care. I find this absolutely fascinating. Donald Trump is the absolute epitome of trolls. He trolls the media, right and left, conservative and liberal, all the time. And they just don't get it. It would be like every time that you or I say something on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else, and all the trolls come out and start, saying all these nasty things about you. If you spent all of your time reacting to all of that, as opposed to just learning that, those are trolls. They're going to say whatever they're going to say, regardless of what I say. They have no valid point. They have no valid counterpoint. So what's the best thing to do? What was the thing, yesterday I talked about manners. What was it that your mother taught you to do when somebody said something awful about you? To ignore it, right? So Anderson Cooper has just legitimately pointed out to his colleague at CNN, Jim Acosta, you have a reputation for making yourself a part of the story, for creating controversy just to get a soundbite. And Acosta's reaction is, I have to do that.
The United States, according to the Washington Post, has made approximately 10,000 false or misleading statements since he's been president. That has put us in the position of being fact checkers in real time, and that frustrates voters. But my goodness, Anderson, can you imagine if we spent the last 2 years?
It doesn't put you in the position of having to be real-time fact checkers. There's nothing that prevents you from taking a president's answer, going back to your little cubicle in the White House press office, and well, not the White House press office, but the White House briefing room, going back to your little cubicle, opening up your laptop, doing your fact checking, and then submitting your report. Nothing says you have to do it in real time. The reason they do it in real time, particularly Jim Acosta, is because he's playing to his audience. He is playing to the CNN viewers. He wants that moment because if you've ever watched, and this actually drives me nuts with all of the networks, not the networks, all the cable channels. Fox is horrible about this. CNN, MSNBC, they all do it. If a candidate is giving a speech somewhere, they break in and they cover it wall to wall. If the president is going, and I think the president himself is actually different and probably does deserve some of this. If the president is going from the East Wing out to Marine One and he stops on the driveway to speak to the media, of course they're going to break in. They're going to break in because the president might say something. But what that leads to that leads to people like Jim Acosta then saying, oh, but I have to create the controversy because the president said something just now that, and apparently in his mind, he must have a Wikipedia mind, that in his mind he knows is false, so he has to instantly challenge the president on the factuality, is that an actual word? On the correctness, on the truthiness of whatever it is the president just said. Well, that is simply not true. You do not have to do that. You choose to do that.
Never fact-checking them and letting all these statements fly. We took keeping them honest off the screen on AC360. We can't do that.
It's also a difficult thing to do is how much do you fact-check? Because there's so many things you could in any given speech fact-check. You could do it all, and you would spend all your time just on the minutia and miss sort of bigger pictures or other issues. It's always a balance.
I agree with that. And that was one of the challenges in writing this book, because you could go down all of these different rabbit holes and live down there for the rest of your life. And what?
Oh, you mean Jim Acosta could have lived down a rabbit hole and we wouldn't have to deal with him anymore? Jim, go find that rabbit hole. Crawl into it. Stat.
What I wanted to do is sort of take the big picture view on this and say, is this the kind of country we want to hand off to the next generation?
Now, I want you to listen closely to what he's about to say, because he's setting this up, as they always do. You know, this president doesn't represent our values. Talking about the press is the enemy of the people, all of that crap. Whether you believe it or don't believe it is immaterial to me. What's more important is this belief that somehow Donald Trump is the only president who has ever had a contentious relationship with the press.
Where we're now comfortable from here on out saying that the press is the enemy of the people. And to our friends in conservative media, Anderson, I say this: it is no guarantee that you get to stay in power forever. And so another administration could come in and do the very same thing to them and say,
oh, you mean another administration could come in, just like the Obama administration, that actually spied on reporters? How quickly we forget. You know, one of the things that truly drives me nuts about just the American public, not you, but just the public in general, is our short-term memory. Maybe we're smoking too much weed, I don't know. But the short-term memory loss, I think it's also because we don't teach history. The short-term memory loss is astounding. Barack Obama actually spied. Remember James Rosen? Does that ring a bell with anybody? He actually tapped the phones of a reporter. There was no predicate for that. There was no legal basis for doing that. Where was the outrage? And for Jim Acosta to now go on Anderson Cooper's show and say, I'm saying to you, conservative media, watch out, because you won't always be in power, and there might come an administration that would truly treat you as enemies of the people, which is exactly what Barack Obama did. Spied on the Fourth Estate, and nobody cares. Well, I do, which is why I brought it up. I don't remember whether it was yesterday or in the past week, but and I know I've said it before on radio, we often get so focused on federal elections, the presidency, the Congress, the House of Representatives, the Senate, that we forget just how important local elections are. And I think, it was this week when I played the soundbite of the new Denver City Councilwoman who said that she was going to implement communism by any means necessary. Well, in another example of that, George Soros has apparently contributed almost $1 million into local Virginia prosecutor races in order to prop up far-left candidates. The Washington Free Beacon has a story in which it outlines that he has put in $580,000 to a candidate whose name I can't even pronounce, Parisa Dagani Tofty, a candidate for Arlington County Commonwealth's attorney, and $400,000 to Steve Descana, a Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney candidate, both for their June 11 primaries. That was yesterday. He's flooded these district attorney races and prosecutor races for some time now. But the thing that I want you to focus on is the importance of paying attention to these elections. For example, in recent years, Soros pushed millions of dollars to numerous far-left candidates, including Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, whom he helped win with a nearly $2 million contribution. Krasner, by the way, can I just say something about the $2 million contribution? I have no problem with that. I don't care if George Soros wants to give $100 million to a district attorney candidate. I just want those campaign contributions disclosed at the time that they are made, so that as people, and this is also why I hate mail-in ballots and early voting, because if George Soros decides, if the election was yesterday, Tuesday, June 11, for the primaries for these two yahoos in Virginia, and he doesn't make the contribution until the last moment because they've gone into debt and he's paying off their debt, and people have been mailing in ballots, and then they learn on the last day, oh, George Soros gave $1 million? Oh, I'm not sure I want to vote for that person. Well, too late, because you are too dumb, fat, and lazy to get off your fat ass and go to a polling place and actually cast a ballot. You want the U.S. Postal Service that if you absolutely guarantee you have to have it there tomorrow or next week or, I don't know, sometime in the future, you don't use the USPS. Sorry to all you mail carriers that are listening. You use FedEx when it absolutely positively has to get there tomorrow. But yet you rely upon the Postal Service. Yeah, I'm casting, this is the most important election of my lifetime. In fact, this election is going to determine the future of the country for me, my grandkids, and my great-grandkids. So here, let me fill out this ballot and put a stamp on it and just throw it out in the mailbox. Golly, we're so stupid. We are so stupid. But anyway, back to George Soros. I don't care if he gives $1 million. He gave $2 million to Larry Krasner, who became the Philadelphia District Attorney. Now, here's why I think it's important to understand why these elections are important. The Washington Free Beacon reports that Krasner, a progressive defense attorney prior to being elected, joked during his campaign that he had built a career that had made him, quote, completely unelectable. Well, I guess we know how that turned out. He got elected. $2 million from George Soros. Here's why Krasner didn't think he was electable. He had represented Occupy Philadelphia, an offshoot of Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter. He had sued the Philadelphia Police Department more than 75 times. But with that kind of money, you now have a far-left Marxist lawyer as the district attorney in Philadelphia. What do you think is going to happen with thugs in Philadelphia? What do you think is going to happen if Black Lives Matter decides to start beating up people, or Occupy Wall Street, or in this case, Occupy Philadelphia, decides they want to start damaging or destroying public or private property? Do you think this guy's going to lift a finger to do anything? No, of course he's not. That's why we have to pay attention to these local elections. That's why I can't believe how far past the November elections for Colorado. And every time I see the Secretary of State, this little dipwad of a Secretary of State that we have, or the Attorney General that we have in Colorado, I just want to scream because nobody paid attention. Nobody cared. And the result of that is someone like George Soros is going to step in and put his money in to help elect far-left Marxist candidates where it really matters. Now, I'm not saying that a congressman doesn't matter or a senator doesn't matter or a president doesn't matter, but if you really want to see where the rubber meets the road, you ought to focus on your city council. You ought to focus on your district attorney. You ought to focus on your county commissioner. You ought to focus on your local sheriff. How many local sheriffs in Colorado, for example, have supported the red flag bill? versus how many sheriffs in Colorado have said, we believe it's unconstitutional and we refuse to enforce it. You see how important local elections are? Please pay attention to local elections. And I know that's going to be hard to do, because if all you do is listen to talk radio, if all you do is listen to the cable news channels, and I don't care if it's Fox or CNN, if all you do is listen to that, all of the air is going to get sucked up. All of the oxygen for all of these races is going to be focused solely on what? The presidency, a few congressional races, and maybe a few more Senate races. Now, if I have to give up something, I don't want to give up the presidency. I'll give up the House of Representatives. But I don't want to give up the U.S. Senate because of judicial nominations. But I also don't want to give up a district attorney position, a city council position, a sheriff's position. I don't want to give up any of those. So please, as we enter into this election season, don't let the shiny object of a national election detract you from preventing a Marxist from becoming your next local sheriff. You know, the dumbassery that I like to talk about that goes on in the culture and in our politics isn't always confined to just the United States or Europe or other places. All we have to do is look north. When you elect a yahoo like Justin Trudeau, you can expect that he's really going to tackle the tough issues of our times. And I know that there are really serious things going on in the world, but if we could only have a leader like him.
Happy to announce that as early as 2021, Canada will ban harmful single-use plastics from coast to coast to coast. Our approach, including determining which products fall under the ban, will be grounded in scientific evidence and closely mirror the actions being taken by the European Union and like-minded countries. Companies that manufacture plastic products or sell items with plastic packaging will be responsible for the collection and recycling of their plastic waste. Whether we're talking about plastic bottles or cell phones, it will be up to businesses to take responsibility for the plastics they're manufacturing and putting out into the world. And not only will this be good for our planet, but it'll result in huge economic gains too. Currently, Canadians throw away $8 billion worth of plastic material every single year. By recycling or reusing these plastics, we can reduce pollution, generate billions of dollars in revenue, and create approximately 42,000 jobs across the country.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that at all? And I have a, just a simple mind, simple question. If Justin Trudeau, if the Prime Minister of Canada, and I assume the Canadian Parliament is going to have to enact the laws to enforce this, if businesses are going to be held responsible for the recycling and the taking possession of the plastics that they have manufactured, how's that going to work out? So I know that there are McDonald's in Canada. Yep, I know it for a fact. Don't ask me how, but I know. So I go to McDonald's in, let's say, Winnipeg, and I get a large Diet Coke, and I head west, and I drive all the way to Calgary, and I get to Calgary. Well, no, let's even say I don't even get as far as Calgary. So I've left Winnipeg, and I'm headed west toward Calgary, and halfway along the trip, I got to pee. Yeah, I got to pee because I've been drinking a Diet Coke. So I finish my Diet Coke. I stop at a rest stop. Let's say it's a Canadian government-sponsored rest stop. I take my pee. I dump out my Coke and my single-use plastic straw. Is McDonald's responsible for that plastic straw? How in the hell is McDonald's supposed to make certain that the plastic straw that I picked up at the McDonald's in Winnipeg and that I disposed of somewhere halfway between Winnipeg and Calgary, that the McDonald's is able to pick that up and recycle it and take possession of it and, I don't know, create jobs and do everything else. This is the unadulterated dumbassery that goes on for government these days. Yeah, Justin Trudeau, not afraid to tackle the tough issues, announces a ban on plastic straws. Oh, Canada. There's no really good way to make a segue from plastic straws to abortion. But I do want to do just a very quick segment on abortion. Because when somebody is honest, no matter how twisted their honesty is, I have to respect their honesty. Well, apparently there is an Irish feminist by the name of Sophie Lewis, and she was doing an interview for something called Air TV. I don't know what it is. And she was being asked about abortion and how, well, just take a listen.
Our side has tended to use have included a kind of ceding of ground to our enemies. We tend to say that abortion is indeed very bad, or we say, luckily it's not killing, luckily it's just a healthcare right. We have very little to lose at the moment when it comes to abortion, and I'm interested in winning radically. And I wonder if we could think about defending abortion as a right to stop doing gestational work. Abortion is, in my opinion, and I recognize how controversial this is, a form of killing. It is a form of killing that we need to be able to defend.
Wow. I agree with her. It is a form of killing. I disagree with her that it's a form of killing that we need to be able to defend. But I do have to admire her honesty. I think it's twisted, but it's honest. And I think what's happening, here's the greater lesson that I think that we should learn from this short, what was that, maybe a 40-second soundbite? Those on the left, for that matter, it doesn't make any difference which side you're on. And I'm not talking about abortion. I'm talking about any political issue. When you push, and you push as hard as you can for what you believe in, and if you're pushing up against something or someone, some principle that you disagree with, there's a breaking point. There's a breaking point at which the other side, this goes right back to the courtroom. I can just feel myself in the courtroom. You have a witness on the stand. Now, you can't badger the witness, but if you just keep pushing the witness within the bounds of courtroom decorum and within the bounds of the rules of evidence, you can eventually get that witness to say exactly what you need them to say. At some point, the witness is just going to say, blah, whatever blah is, and that's the truth. And that's your aha moment. That's your gotcha moment. So for everybody, again, I'm not talking about abortion, but abortion is the example that I'm using to make this point. If we would simply learn as conservatives, as libertarians, as constitutionalists, as people that believe in free markets, if we would learn to push back, if we would learn to just take them on, those who are Marxists, those who are communists, if we would just learn to just push them up against the wall. Now, I'm not advocating that you physically go push them up against the wall, but in a rhetorical, in a logical, and for that matter, to a certain degree, in an emotional extent, because you have to do all three. You have to take the battle when you're battling political ideas, cultural ideas. You have to have not just logic, you also have to have emotion. And if you tie those two together and you, metaphorically, push your opponents up against the wall, they'll just spill out the truth, just as this woman did. It is a form of killing that we need to be able to defend, that is twisted but honest. And we should recognize her for her honesty, because once you get someone to that point where they just tell the truth, you've won 90% of the battle. And now that they've spoken their truth, in this case, it's a form of killing that we need to be able to defend, you have the upper hand. You have all but won the argument. So just take that little example. I know it's abortion, and I know abortion is extremely controversial. But that is a great example of how, with everything going on right now in state legislatures, with all of the media coverage of the abortion issue, of people being afraid that Roe v. Wade's going to be overturned, all of those things are pushing them metaphorically up against the wall to where they just have to say the truth. And we should learn to do that in whatever arguments we're having about politics or about the culture. Bill Maher was on CNN recently with Chris Cuomo. And in the course of the conversation, the whole issue of political correctness came up. And Maher described political correctness as a cancer on progressivism. Now, to me, that's pretty astonishing in and of itself. Although I would expect Bill Maher, who is anything but politically correct, to have that attitude. But listen to what else he said.
They don't help themselves a lot. And I think a lot of this far left political correctness is a cancer on progressivism. I think when you talk to Trump supporters, they are not blind to his myriad flaws. But one thing they always say is he's not politically correct. I don't think you can overestimate how much people have been choking on political correctness and hate it. There were 2 studies about this recently. It was in the New York Times front page story a few months ago. It was also in the Atlantic about a year ago. The vast majority of liberals in this country hate it. They think political correctness has gone way too far. No one likes to be living on eggshells.
But everybody is living on eggshells. Politically correct. He was absolutely right when he said that Trump supporters can look at Donald Trump's flaws, because every president has flaws. They can look at those and say, but that's okay. He's breaking the eggshells. He's not politically correct. Bill Maher is saying that the left is so beholden to political correctness that it is keeping them from advancing their progressive agenda. He's right. Political correctness, this is where the left will end up eating the left. Political correctness doesn't care whether your issue is a conservative or a liberal or progressive issue. It doesn't make any difference. The purpose of political correctness is to stifle the debate. The purpose of political correctness is to shut down thought. So Bill Maher's right. It is stifling to progressives, just as it is stifling to conservatives. And speaking of political correctness, as George Orwell illustrated in his book 1984, progressives believe that it doesn't matter what happens. What matters is what people think happened. Orwell said, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Well, the present is controlled by the sort of dumbasses that run Netflix. And this is really bad news for the future. Now, full disclosure, I'm a subscriber to Netflix, and there are a lot of programs on Netflix that I like. I keep seeing an ad every time I turn on Netflix for a movie called When They See Us. But before we get to that, let's go back to Orwell for a second. People of the future will not know what happened. They will know what the Marxists want them to think happened. They do that because that's how they advance the narrative that secures their power. So if you have a heinously false series on Netflix about the Central Park Five, that's a case in point. Now, the liberal media has lauded When They See Us, which disgustingly portrays sociopaths as put upon victims of America's racist system. Of course, if you can tie it to racism, Netflix or Hollywood will produce it. But digging for new lows, the New York Times actually ran a story praising this movie under this headline: "The True Story of How a City in Fear Brutalized the Central Park Five." Brutalized? The kids were brutalized? Here's what actually happened. Sometime between 9 and 9:30 on the night of April 19, 1989, a group of more than 30 black and Hispanic teenagers, including the aforementioned Central Park Five, attacked a 28-year-old woman by the name of Tricia Malee while she was jogging in the park. One of the assailants, whose identity would remain unknown for 13 years, raped her with vaginal penetration, leaving his DNA inside her cervix. Now, as this young woman screamed in agony, one or more of her attackers shut her up by fracturing her skull with a lead pipe and then mutilating her face with a brick. She lost 3/4 of her blood. Her brain activity scarcely was detected by medical equipment in the ER. So badly was her face mangled that one of her eyes had popped out of its socket. It was so bad, her face was so bad, that even her boyfriend was able to recognize her only by a familiar ring on her finger. Now, the DA's office initially assigned the woman's case to its homicide unit because nobody, including the doctors, thought she would survive for even a single night. Yet she did survive, even though she spent almost 2 weeks in a coma. But she wasn't the only victim. During the half hour just prior to their attack on Miss Malee, the Central Park Five and their 24+ comrades had participated in a bunch of random beatings of other passersby in the park. Every one of the attacks was explicitly motivated by race. But the attackers are portrayed as the victims of race. You see, progressivism isn't just wrong. Progressivism is precisely 180 degrees opposite of what the truth really is. But because liberals control the past through the present, just as Orwell said, the future will see these vicious thugs as martyred saints, just like they see Trayvon Martin as a martyred saint. That's precisely what Netflix was after. And if you want to talk about adding insult to injury, when the victim, still disfigured and unsteady, when she showed up at the courthouse to testify, groups of black demonstrators, led by Al Sharpton, taunted her, calling her a white slut, a filthy white whore, and claiming that her boyfriend was the rapist, not the Central Park Five. Now, we all know Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton, being the race baiter he is nonetheless a central figure in Democrat politics. And aspiring Democrats always go up to New York to kiss his ring, or to kiss his butt, I'm not sure which. The Central Park Five, they confessed. They were only given modest prison sentences, but nonetheless, Bill de Blasio paid the rapists a $41 million settlement in their suit against New York City for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress. Those thugs became millionaires for what they did to that young woman. That any decent person could support Democrats, particularly in New York, after learning the facts about the Central Park Five, just for me defies comprehension. The evidence against these thugs was mountainous. And I don't think any truly informed person about this case doubts what really happened. But liberals, Netflix, just lies. Now, interestingly, it's not that you and I don't have access to the truth. In yesterday's Wall Street Journal, prosecutor Linda Fairstein detailed a lot of the ways in which the series, When They See Us, she detailed how it deviates from what really happened. You see, now she was a supervisor of the team that prosecuted the thugs. She described Netflix's propaganda as, quote, so full of distortions and falsehoods as to be an outright fabrication. But how many people read the Wall Street Journal compared to the number of people that are going to be just like me? They're going to see the story. They're going to see the trailer for the series. But if you don't know the truth about the Central Park Five, you're going to watch it and you're going to think that it's true. Back to Orwell. It doesn't matter what happened. It only matters what people think happened. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Netflix is controlling the future. They're controlling what people are going to think happened. You know, the filmmaker, Ava DuVernay, is a black woman. So I guess it would be racist not to believe, or at least pretend to believe, whatever lies she tells. Because, you know, going back to Orwell, the future won't know any better. You know, these thugs continue to reap the rewards from this horrific crime. So that's what social justice does, which is the exact opposite of what any morally sane person would regard as actual justice. So if you are Netflix and you happen to come across this series, When They See Us, do me a favor. I don't care if you watch it. I'm not telling you shouldn't watch it. Instead, go find the Wall Street Journal and find the truth about what really happened. Because Netflix is certainly not going to tell you. You know, speaking of movies, now I'm not a Game of Thrones fan. And in fact, when Tamara and I were in Dubrovnik a few months ago, because she is a fan of Game of Thrones, she had to explain to me the significance of the old city in Dubrovnik. Apparently, a lot of people go just because that's where Game of Thrones has been filmed. I went because, well, it's Croatia. However, I didn't realize just how stupid some people can be when it comes to Game of Thrones.
I'm going to break the wheel.
If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, you're familiar with the direwolf, the popularity of the creature in the fantasy world, creating consequences in the real world.
I'm Jerome Flynn for Peter. You might also know me as Bronn from Game of Thrones. More and more huskies are being bred and bought because of their resemblance to direwolves.
That surge in breeding has also led to a surge in abandonments.
A lot of huskies and husky mixes have been coming in.
Animal shelters in both Monterey and Santa Cruz counties are reporting a massive increase in the number of huskies. The Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter says right now they have 6 huskies, and that's the most they've ever had, and it's happening all over the state with very similar stories. Take Dakota here, for example. She's a year old. People often get these dogs as puppies because they're so beautiful, but they don't really understand the maintenance that goes into taking care of these dogs as they get older. This isn't the first time we've seen pop culture impact shelters.
The Chihuahuas, when Paris Hilton had a first Chihuahua, 101 Dalmatians came out. It seemed like there were a lot of Dalmatians.
But now it's happening to huskies, and a rise in surrenders means more euthanizations.
I just find the story, I don't know what it says about American culture, other than we go buy dogs based on what we see in the movies. Seriously, get a life. Do you remember the controversy between Facebook and Nancy Pelosi over the supposedly doctored video, which was really just a meme? Someone had taken a video of Nancy Pelosi speaking somewhere and had deliberately slowed it down and spliced it up to make her appear drunk as she spoke. I think even I could do that, and I'm not really a video editor. It doesn't take a lot of talent or skill, in my opinion, to take a video of Nancy Pelosi and make her sound like she's drunk. Well, Nancy Pelosi was recently at a summit of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, and she was being interviewed by CNN's Manu Raju. Is that how you say it? I don't know. I don't care. Manu Raju. When she had this, before I tell you what she said. So back to Facebook. So there's a story in the news that says that Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, founder of Facebook, reached out to Nancy Pelosi to talk to her about the doctored video, but that Nancy Pelosi has refused to call Mark Zuckerberg back. I don't know. I just find that funny. I just find it funny to think about. So, Mark, what were you going to tell her? Mom, I'm sorry. And what's she supposed to do? You little twerp, what are you doing? I mean, good grief. Of course she's not going to call him back. It's a meme. Get over it. I don't care whether Facebook took it down or not. It's a meme. Just let it be. But anyway, Nancy had this to say about Trump. She is over Trump. And I think she's over impeachment too.
And I maintain that to go to the courts, we have to have the strongest possible case. Ironclad. We've won in the courts on the couple of the things that Mr. Cummings has put forth. Mazer, the president's accounting firm, they should release their documents. On the Deutsche Bank, Maxine Waters case, we won that case in court. Of course, they'll appeal because they want to obstruct the American people from having the truth. So the question you ask, do we get more by having an inquiry? Some say yes, some say no.
If a majority of your caucus wants to go forward with an impeachment inquiry, would you go for it?
It's not even close in our caucus.
But eventually,
you know what? Why are we speculating on hypotheticals? What we're doing is winning in court. We won a victory getting the documents from the Justice Department today for fear of further going to court, although we're still going to hold the Attorney General in contempt today. And then,
Well, no. Actually, you're not going to hold him in contempt. But I digress.
The path that we're on is a path that I think, look, I'm going to tell you something.
You said you're not a path.
Nothing as divisive in our country, on my view, than impeachment. Our founders gave us so much to be grateful for. They were a blessing intellectually and values and all the rest. Thank God they made our Constitution amendable. They had that wisdom as well. But they gave us guidance in this way. They said, e pluribus unum, from many one. They couldn't imagine how many we would become or how different we would be from each other, but they knew we had to be one. So we're trying to make decisions as we go forth that are unifying, not dividing.
Because
infrastructure, the president says he wants to do that. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs, the president says he wants to do that. Cleaner government, not so sure about that. But nonetheless, it is part of our agenda.
Wow. First of all, Manu Raju couldn't get a question in edgewise regarding impeachment. And I think Nancy Pelosi made it quite clear there that there must only be a vocal minority. We're looking at you, AOC. We're looking at you, Maxine Waters. You notice how quiet they've been on impeachment? I think Mother Hen Nancy has told them to shut up. She rightly points out that not only would impeachment fail, let me be very specific here. Impeachment might pass the House, but the trial would not result in a conviction in the Senate. And I think she knows that. And I think she knows that even within her own caucus, there is division about whether or not impeachment is the proper route to take. And she's doing everything she can to shut it down. And in this case, the media, you notice the media, Manu Raju is the one that kept wanting to go back to impeachment and the caucus, and Nancy would have none of it. I think we can safely assume for the very near future, if not for the rest of this election cycle, impeachment is off the table. Let's get to a taxpayer relief shot. This is a classic taxpayer relief shot. Comes to us from Overland Park, Kansas.
Yeah, that's right. Right now, investigators are talking to two people, the clerk who shot the suspect inside this Boost Mobile store and a woman who showed up immediately following the shooting. The attempted robbery happened around 7:45 this evening at the Boost Mobile store on Metcalf near 76 in Overland Park. Police tell us a man walked into the store and demanded that the person behind the counter hand over all of the cell phones. The suspect then jumped over the counter with a gun. That's when the clerk, who was also armed, shot him. The suspect died inside the store. Investigators are now trying to verify the story.
We're going to process the scene, and at the same time, we're going to review the videotape and see what occurred exactly. I mean, because you have to understand, cameras don't lie.
Now, the woman who showed up after the shooting, it's unclear if she played a role, if at all, in the attempted robbery. Police say the suspect walked into the store by himself. The woman, however, tried to get into the store after the man was shot, but the clerk inside had already locked the door and called 911.
Wow. Thugs, if you're going to walk into the Boost Mobile and try to steal a bunch of cell phones, here's a free warning for you. The clerk might be armed. And when you jump across the counter with the gun in your hand, you might end up DRT, dead right there. The next one comes to us from Oklahoma City.
Exactly right. Miguel Alvarado was driving southbound right here on this road when he began to hear gunshots. Next thing he knew, he could not believe what he was seeing.
Yes, I saw everything.
A highway shooting.
Well, he started shooting like crazy because you don't know where that bullet go.
Left Miguel bracing for his life inside his car.
And I ducked down, and I just want to see the cops, shoot him.
He watched as a man carrying a gun began firing at cars.
Numerous people that called in and said he was pointing a gun at me.
Police responding to the scene within minutes.
When the officers arrived, they saw this individual. They confronted him.
The officers that shoot in the legs, and the guy fall down and told him to drop that gun.
They ordered him to put his gun down. He put the gun down, put his hands in the air.
The guy is still going, and I pick it up again and start shooting the cops.
Then he turned around and picked the gun back up and faced the officers. It was at this point the officers discharged their firearms.
The cops shoot him back.
And they hit the suspect and
kill him.
That's some of the best video edit. You can't see it, but what KOCO, the ABC affiliate in Oklahoma City, is doing is they're going back and forth between the public information officer for the state troopers and this witness that watched it. So as the PIO would say one thing, then the witness would answer it. That was classic editing. But think about this particular taxpayer relief shot. You got a guy out on Interstate 35 that is shooting at cars. And when the cops get there, he points the gun at the cops. He's already shown his willingness to shoot and kill people. What are the cops supposed to do? Of course, return fire, and he ends up dead right there. Now, thanks for listening, but I got to remind you, on Thursday at 7 p.m., Zoom.us. We're going to do a little town hall meeting for the podcast on Zoom. So you have to just go to Zoom.us, and we will get all of you the PIN code so that you can upload the app, and then you can see me and my executive producer, Steve, and we'll take your questions, and we'll have a good time talking for 30 minutes or an hour. We'll just see how long it goes. So that is Thursday night at 7 o'clock Mountain. You need to have the application Zoom, ZOOM, which you can get at Zoom.us. I've got it on all of my computers. I do it for business meetings all the time. It's a pretty good program. I think you'll enjoy it. And we're able to converse in real time. So that's Thursday night at 7 p.m. Now, the reminder, iTunes, Go to iTunes, subscribe there. You can also subscribe at Spreaker, but if you do it on iTunes, I would appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star rating, and if you have time to write a review, write a review. I would greatly appreciate that. And follow me on Spreaker, because apparently, I don't know whether this is true or not, because I can't get a straight answer out of anybody, but apparently you need 100 followers on Spreaker before iHeart approves your podcast to be on the iHeart app. I don't even know why I'm trying, but I guess it's because I'm competitive, and I want to make the podcast as accessible as I can to all of you. So if you have the opportunity on Spreaker to follow me, the check's in the mail. And then last but not least, if you want to follow me on social media, the one-stop shop for doing that is simply to go to michaelbrowntoday.com. michaelbrowntoday.com, and across the bottom you'll see all the icons for LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. What am I leaving out? They're all there at michaelbrowntoday.com. I want to take just one moment and say thanks to everybody that's subscribed, that has been listening to the podcast. I noticed that we got people listening in Dallas and Chicago. So if you can help me spread it out, if you can put the podcast up on your Facebook page, if you can tweet it out, if you can put it on Instagram, whatever you can do to help me grow the podcast, well, you know, the check's in the mail, and I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.